Everybody, do me a favor while I'm walking up. How about a round of applause for Mike and everyone at MadPal for putting on this fantastic, this fantastic conference and for having us here in Boston. I love visiting Boston. It's a beautiful city. It's like the gateway to, I guess, Worcester. And most importantly, I don't think I'll ever have this chance again. I've never had it before. I went to Game 1 on Tuesday night. So, where's my Yankee fan at? Sorry. This actually has been, I missed the very beginning of today, but I've been here paying as much attention as I can. This has been an incredible conference. I don't know about you, my synapses are firing. Like every panel, every speaker, I've had a lot I want to say and contribute. I mean, I've been throwing questions. That Richard Thaler one was mine. And it's been good. And to try to maintain some focus, I'd like to start by asking this group, and I think it will be some insightful answers here, 3 questions. Raise your hand if you know, roughly speaking, within 10 or 15 cents, the price per gallon to fill up your car. Keep your hands up if you know, roughly speaking, within 10 or 15 cents, the price per gallon to heat your home. A couple of people in the back. Raise your hand if you use credit cards. Okay. Keep your hand up if you know at the end of the month exactly what your credit card bill will be. This crowd, a few people still stick with it. Raise your hand if sometime in the last 2 weeks you promise yourself that the next day you're going to wake up and get some exercise. Okay. Keep your hand up if raising your hand is all the exercise you've gotten in the last 2 weeks. So I ask these questions for a few reasons. And ultimately it's because they are easily accessible ways to demonstrate behavioral economics. This demonstrate the human biases that drive us to financial decision-making, really financial evaluation, valuing financial choices in irrational ways. Right? The first question is really, what's the price per gallon of energy? Right? But in one context, a car, we know what it is. In another context, our home, we don't. In many ways, that reflects mental accounting, the way that we think about different types of money and different types of spending differently just by the labels that are attached to them. We'll talk about that in a little bit and some ways that we can use that bias to get better solutions. Second question about credit cards reflects 2 things. Credit cards are great at aggregation. Right? It's not just one spend, it's a months of spending. And we find that the more things are lumped together, the more unlikely we are to be able to remember any specifics. In addition, credit cards really are perfect vehicles to demonstrate the pain of paying. Which I'll talk about more, this idea that we're not really aware that we're spending, right? And then time passes, we don't feel like we're spending at the moment, and so we forget what we're spending. And the third question, which in many ways is the most important one, reflects self-control. We all know when we make that promise that if we exercise the next day, we're going to live longer, we're going to be healthier, we're going to be happier. It's best for us for everything. But we can't keep that promise even to ourselves. So how can we be expected to keep promises to ourselves about financial spending? How can we be expected to keep promises to anybody else if we can't do it for ourselves? Now, it seems a little gloomy. I don't want to be gloomy. I actually have become a big believer in behavioral science and in the importance of talking about money in the context of human behavior. For many years, I was sort of one of those, like, money is the root of all evil guys. But I've come to see that actually there's a beauty in money. And as I'm sure this room is well aware, money has enabled modern society to blossom like it wouldn't be otherwise, right? Because you can save money, you can specialize, and we can have things like conferences and beautiful architecture and whatever the Kardashians do. You know, we have this thing that is general, right? Money allows us to spend on anything. We're free from the barter system. It's divisible. In the old days, maybe you could make a couch and you wanted some chickens. You couldn't cut off 1/10 of a couch to get 1 chicken. Money you can divide into any amount. Money's fungible. Right? Any $10 of yours is the same as any other $10. So it doesn't matter if it's in a savings account or if it's in cash in your pocket. It's that $10. It's fungible, interchangeable. And money is storable. In many ways, that's the biggest innovation. Right? We could save money. You can't save chickens and couches for the future or for your retirement. And it's these awesome features about money that also make it a real challenge to think about. Right? We think about money all the time. We don't think about how we think about it. We obsess about money, right? But we obsess about getting it and spending it, not saving and investing. Right? There's no TV show lifestyles of the frugal and thrifty. If I'd said that, it would have been funnier. Right? But we think about spending, and we think about getting the money, and we don't think about the hard stuff that are financial decisions. And the truth is, all these things that make money so awesome, all these features about it, are also what make it really hard to think about it. And that's why all of us make really poor financial decisions all the time, because it's hard to think about money. How are you supposed to think about money? You're supposed to think about opportunity costs. Right? Every financial decision is supposed to be based upon opportunity costs. And for those of you that may not remember Econ 101, it's basically an opportunity costs are when we make a financial decision, everything else that money could be spent on now or in the future. That's a huge possibility. That's a lot to think about. Right? That classic $5 latte that every Susie Orman financial advisor uses. Right? What we're supposed to do is we walk into the store and it's like an 80s movie, like freeze frame. That was me. I was going to spend $5 on a latte, but instead I thought, ooh, that could be $5 compound interest, $25. Right? It could be 2.5 lotto tickets. Right? We're supposed to do that, but that is impossible. It's just not what we do. It's just not, we're not computers. And I should say, and this audience, I think you're really smart, you know about money, but I tell this to everyone. Nobody can think about money. One of the first hurdles we have to overcome and recognize in our human behavior is that none of us get it. Your peers don't get it. You're not the dumb one. Right? I speak and do some work with some wealth advisory firms, big names you've heard of. And very frequently, I get this feedback from them. People tell me, our top advisors, the people that are the best at telling other people what to do with their money, people that give high wealth individuals the advice that makes them high wealth individuals, those employees of ours are terrible at managing their own money. Right? I can tell you, hey, this is what you should do for your kid's college fund. But when it comes to me and my little Timmy, there's emotions. There's confusion. Even the people that know what they should do poorly, because financial decisions are emotional. Right? You've got this broad opportunity cost, this vast unknown thing that you can choose from. And you've got uncertainty, and you've got emotions. And this is what drives poor financial decisions. And this is why, for me to discover behavioral science, in a longer talk, I would give you my traditional path from law school to Burning Man to comedian to behavioral science guy. To find a place where you combine traditional economics with the study of human psychology. Because ultimately, all the solutions that we've talked about today, a common thread is like, how do we get people to do it? Right? Is it ethical to nudge them? Right? What should we design? And to understand human motivation is going to be the key to finding that solution. And I believe you cannot change human nature. So that's your goal, stop. You cannot change human nature. But what we can do is we can understand human nature so that we then create systems and environments so that human nature is used for our benefit by us instead of against us by others. What I'd like to do for a little while now is talk about some of the behavioral principles that relate to financial decision making, some of the biases, some of the most common ones, the ones that I think affect your work, give you a few ideas of potential, I don't want to say solutions, but ways to think about those for your clients and your customers. The first one I think is most applicable to this group in particular is the pain of paying. You've heard versions of this throughout the day. The pain of paying is this concept that when we pay for something, when we hand over a $20 bill, it triggers activity in the same region of our brain as physical pain. Now, pain, evolutionarily, there's a word there, pain serves an evolutionary purpose, right? It makes us pay attention to that moment. You put your hand on a stove, that pain makes you look at the hand and move it from the stove. Right? You break your leg, the pain makes you think, oh my gosh, I got to go to the hospital. Right? In 7th grade, you call up Megan Flaherty. You're like, hey, Megan, you want to go out? She's like, hey, who's this? You're like, it's Jeff. Jeff who? Right? That pain doesn't go away. But you can use it for something. Right? There is a pain of paying that will help us pay attention and therefore get closer to thinking about the opportunity costs. Unfortunately, from the consumer perspective, we don't embrace that pain. Right? We actually numb it. Seinfeld Jerry Seinfeld talks about helmets, how helmets were developed. He said, humans were doing all these activities that were cracking their brains. But instead of stopping their brain cracking activity, they just put a little piece of plastic on their head. Right? Credit cards are that little piece of plastic for our financial pain. Right? They stop us from feeling that pain. I'll just talk about credit cards for 1 second because they do it in a great way. The pain of pain is comprised of two components. There is your awareness of the spending and the time between when you spend and when you pay. Right? If you think about you go to a credit card or you go to a dinner and you hand over your credit card, you're not actually paying right then. You're signing a promise that you're going to pay later. And then when later comes, at the end of the month, well, that dinner was 3 weeks ago. And the farther apart that spending is from the payment is from the consumption, the less likely you are to remember. And you're just not aware of it. Again, you're handing over this credit card, not handing over your cash. And there are numerous studies that show when people use credit cards, they spend more, they tip more, and they are less likely to remember what they spend. And there's a couple studies in particular that show that just the display of credit card paraphernalia, right, a MasterCard logo, a little machine, just that makes people spend more, tip more, and forget what they've spent. Not to the same degree, but it shows that it becomes this like Pavlovian thing. But instead of salivating over a dinner bell or Idris Elba, we're salivating over credit card spending. Nobody here thinks Idris Elba is hot. Is that what I'm? Thank you. And credit cards are also useful because I think a lesson that we can take from this is you can dial up or dial down the pain of paying. There's sort of a spectrum, right? You pay cash, you write a check, credit cards. Now there's all this automatic bill pay. There's Easy Pass. There's Apple Pay. There's that horrible Apple Face Pay now. You remember that commercial? It was like in the Super Bowl, like really handsome guy's walking through a bazaar and he looks at a hat and it pops on his head. There's no pain of paying, right? But when you make paying easier, you make paying easier. You make it less conscious, less thoughtful. No one comes close to thinking about those opportunity costs. And that is a problem from the consumer perspective. Think about financial advisors. Let's say someone's got $1 million portfolio. I live in New York. That gets you a nice studio apartment, maybe. And there's a 1% management fee. Do you ever feel the pain of that 1% management fee? No, it's like on your monthly statement. It's buried down there. Maybe you see it now and again. But what if instead of it just being buried on your monthly statement, at the end of the year, you had to write your financial advisor a check for $10,000? Suddenly, you think a lot more about that. You'd feel that pain, and you think, is that a good decision or not? So when you think about developing and designing other things, the pain of paying is an important thing that can be baked in and can be considered. Holy crap, is that right, or is that from the... Okay, cool. I'll talk fast. 2.5 other things. Effort and fairness is another way that we judge value and make financial decisions irrationally. Right? There's a legend that Pablo Picasso was sitting in the park, and a woman came up to him, "You're Picasso, oh my God, could you paint my picture?" And he looks at the woman for a minute and takes out his brush, and in a single stroke, perfect picture of the woman. Hands it over, said, "This is amazing, this is incredible, this is my likeness, this is everything about me, what do I owe you?" $5,000. What? That took you like 1 minute. It was no effort at all. That's totally unfair. No. It took me 1 minute plus my entire life. That woman was judging based upon the effort that she saw. Because in getting a painting from Picasso, how could she possibly judge what that is worth? How could she judge the value of that? So she based it upon what she could see. Right? People will pay a locksmith who spends an hour to get into their homes and breaks 3 locks and sweats and swears more than a locksmith that walks up and opens the door in a minute. Because it looks like they're working harder. Right? They're paying for incompetence. Right? How many people worked for a big consulting firm like McKinsey at some point in their lives? Okay, good. A lot of half-raised hands. What does a big consulting firm do? Right? They come, they get assigned somewhere, they go in for 3 weeks. At the end of the assignment, they walk in, they present a 200-slide PowerPoint. Right? All you care about is the last slide, the recommendation. It's always fire everybody. Right? But they show all this effort, like, oh, the first slide, this is our food on the flight here, and here's the taxi we took. Like, they just show all this effort, and then they give you a bill for $250,000, and you're like, oh, it's worth it. Right? Uber. You open up an Uber, you order an Uber, you see why it's taken 5 minutes for that car to get there, because you see it moving along, right? That's occupational transparency, they call it. But same, you're seeing that effort. Kayak, progress bar. Domino's, progress bar. City of Boston. Typically, governments are terrible at showing the effort and having that value, but there was a while ago, I'll get the numbers wrong, but in the winter, a lot of potholes. City of Boston was fixing those potholes, but no one knew about it, right? Because they got 200,000 potholes in the city, and you don't see the 3 in front of your home getting fixed. So they created a website that showed each day we filled in these 5 potholes. And suddenly, people's appreciation for their work rose. They understood, oh, our tax dollars are indeed at work. So again, showing effort is something that can be like, go back to that financial planner. I don't mean to make them out to be bad, but financial planning is valuable, but you don't see that effort. So how can you show your worth? Creative people working online on the internet, how do they show their value? It's something to consider, in addition to showing consumers what their value is too. Self-control, we talked a little bit about. Mental accounting, I want to quickly address. Mental accounting I talked about in terms of the gas and the heating your home. A big problem that people have, and I think a lot of you deal with them, is people that spend too much of their discretionary spending. And there are studies that show one of the reasons is because people mentally account for their discretionary spending based upon what's in their checking account. That is what people on a day-to-day basis think they have to spend. Now, what you can do with that knowledge is you can say, okay, let's understand people don't take a long time to make financial decisions. They go for the easy solution. Just like you can have automatic withdrawals go into a 401k or other devices, you could take some of that money that normally goes into people's checking account and put into a savings account. They can still access it easily. It's not like a 401k where there are penalties, but suddenly the balance on their checking account goes down. And they trick themselves. They think they have less to spend, and suddenly they find a way to adjust their life to spending less, right? Because they've mentally counted, in this case, using actual different accounts to determine what it is they can spend. That money is still theirs. It's still easy. They could. But on day-to-day, we get a receipt from our ATM, or we look at our phone for our balance. We think about money in terms of our checking account, in terms of discretionary spending. Loss aversion. Who here has heard of loss aversion? Pretty common behavioral principle. The idea of loss aversion for those is that we feel loss a lot more than we feel an equal gain, right? You lose $10, that feeling of bad is only equaled out by the good of gaining $20. When you think about designing your products, this can go into how you frame things. People are asked in terms of retirement, could you live on 80% of your income? Could you live on 20% less income? Which do you think people are more likely to say yes, they could live to? 80%? Yeah, or losing 20%. It's the same question, but that loss is just felt much more strongly. It's much more of a challenge. One last story, and then I'll take some questions. Story is actually a study, and I think it goes to the broader point that I'm sort of giving a survey look at here about some of these principles and the way they can be used. My co-author, Dan Ariely. Anybody here who's heard of Dan Ariely? Okay, good. That's excellent. Asked that question 3 years ago, it'd be one person. And I think that's a good sign. He did a study in Kenya for people living in scarcity, trying to increase some savings amongst them. And I'm going to give you the very short, condensed version of it. They wanted to make it so people would save a little bit every week, and they created bank accounts for them in a place where they couldn't easily take it out. And they created a number of interventions to increase savings rate. And I'm going to tell you what these are, and I want to ask this crowd what you think had the most impact. The first intervention was just an app on their phone where each week they could send money to their savings account. The second was the app with a text reminder each week saying, don't forget to save in your account. The third was the text reminder, but it was made to seem like it came from the person's child. Like, hey, mommy and daddy, it's little Timmy, just a common Kenyan name. don't forget to save for my future. The fourth app was a coin that had 24 numbers on it. It was a 24-week study, and each week, if you saved some money, you scratched it off, and you could like put the coin on your mantle or wherever. The next condition was a 10% match. Right? You put in $10, we give you $1. The next was a 20% match. You put in 20, or you put in 10, we give you $2. Then they had 10% match with loss aversion. So at the beginning of the week, they put in that $1, and if you didn't put in your 10, they took it away. You saw that money go away. And next was 20% loss aversion match. Same, they put in 2 and they took it away. Right. Who thinks that just giving them the app to save money was the most effective? Who think the app with the text reminder was the most effective? Text reminder from your child. The coin. 10% match. 20% match. 10% match with loss aversion. 20% loss aversion. Okay, those very educated and thoughtful and wrong guesses. And quickly, the fact that it's wrong, the answer they got was not what they intended. And this is something that's very important now. I'm not doing it justice. Behavioral interventions, which I'm a big advocate of, are not off-the-shelf solutions. You have to experiment, and you have to be willing to have it not work. And it's a big challenge for our field to get people to understand you need that academic insight. And the reason is because even the academics don't know until they test it. Very quickly, the text, just having the app increased savings a little. The text increased it a little more. The 10% match increased it a little more. 20% match, same as 10%. The amount didn't matter. The 10% with loss aversion, a little more. 20% loss aversion, same as 10% loss aversion. And those two were the same as getting a text reminder from your kid. Shows the power of using your children. But the most effective was the coin. No money, no loss aversion, just a coin. And there's a lot of details about why they think this turned out as it did. And the bottom line is that it showed that you were saving. It showed that you were thinking about your family's future. It started a conversation about money. Particularly when you're living in scarcity, if you don't spend much, if you save, what does that mean? It means you're bringing home less. You're bringing home less food or clothes. And even when it's not scarcity, when you're saving, we don't see savings. We don't see investment. Right? We compete on spending. Right? We compete on earning. Like, oh, my neighbor got a new car. They painted their house. I got new clothes. Savings and investment are invisible. And I hope that that changes. My delusion with the book and some of the speaking and other things I do and some of the work you're doing is that we can start a conversation about money and help people realize no one has it perfect. Not to be ashamed by the fact that you don't know what to do in financial situations and to learn from each other. There's a survey that I find fascinating. A group of men were more willing to admit whether or not they use Viagra than how much they save for retirement. I mean, what's more embarrassing, like your tiny little ineffectual retirement fund, or... And to me, that is, it's like surprising, not surprising. Right? Because I talk about money all the time, but I don't really talk about how I talk about money and these human failings. And like it can feel shameful. And I hope that we can change that. And my hope is that the children are our future. We talked a lot about millennials and the different attitudes that maybe they have. And I don't know if that's true. It's a long story. But I look at the future like of my kids. Right? I mentioned using your kid. And I'm fascinated because I think that they're not going to be influenced by the same forces that we have been. And they're going to have new opportunities, like even religion. Right? Like my wife is Catholic and I'm Jewish. And as you may know, if the mother is Catholic and the father is Jewish, that means the children are cashews. And I know that's a little nutty way to end, but I gotta. I am terrible at taking the time and looking down at my shoes to do it. So do we have time for some questions? Yeah. So I guess they're automatic. Yes.
All right. First question, Jeff. Can credit card points make purchasing with them worth it? Paying with cash, you are, in theory, leaving money on the table.
Credit card points are fascinating. That's a good question, whoever that was. Credit card points, they trigger another whole behavioral field of loyalty. And there is a value in loyalty beyond the chance of getting your free tickets. That also triggers identity, right? Suddenly, I'm a United guy. Right? And that is part of my identity. I'm a United Airlines guy. There are a lot of things there. So yes, loyalty points can add to what a credit card provides. All of these things really depend on the individual, what particular principle triggers them more. If you spend way too much money on your credit card, it doesn't matter if it's loyalty. Some people are good at credit cards, and others, fall for different things, different biases.
All right, our next question. Some people do love saving, and extreme couponing is a popular TV show. What's going on there?
Do you guys know JCPenney? You know JCPenney's business model? Everything's overpriced, and everything's on sale. Everything across the board. This guy named Ron Johnson came in, new CEO. He said, forget it. We're just going to be nice to our customers and install fair and square pricing. We're just going to tell them what it is, comparable to our competitors. All their customers left. Because it was this game. It was this challenge. It was this finding this savings. And, it's a lot in the book about savings. I'm sure y'all will see the commercial soon for the holidays. Oh, I saved $200. No, you spent $1,000. But again, savings and sales, it triggers not just this game feeling, but it triggers us this sense of oh my gosh, I can value this, right? I don't know what this shirt could cost or should cost. I have no idea. I'm totally lost in uncertainty and I feel awkward that I don't know what it is. Oh, but it used to be $100? Well, I know a $60 shirt is better than a $100 shirt. Yay! Right? That's what kind of happens with couponing. In addition to it's an issue of having some control and the extreme, all these things, we don't want people to become budget freaks. Just be aware of the mistakes and find the solutions that work for them.
Okay. Next question. What's the UX lesson in the coin in Kenya story?
That is a good question. That, to give an honest answer, I would say that the UX people might be more qualified to think about. But my belief and the times when this has come up, it's about showing the invisible. It's about showing that what you're doing for the future is actually making an impact now. And again, I'm gonna defer to the people with more UX insight to what that does for their design. But it becomes about making the invisible visible.
And last question, how do we help people think about money as a future value and not simply as an immediate enabler?
That is a great question and the biggest challenge. And in a longer talk, I often talk about the retirement crisis, and it's based upon the fact that people don't think about the future. It's sort of the basis of self-control is that we don't think about our future selves the same way that we think about our immediate selves. Right now, there's emotions and there's pleasure. Right? I want to eat that one marshmallow. You guys know the marshmallow test, right? I want to eat it now. It feels good now. Waiting for future Jeff in 5 minutes or 50 years, I don't care about that guy. I don't connect with that guy. And this is ultimately what it is. This is why we can't exit. I don't care about that guy. Or we also think, oh, you know what? Future Jeff, 10 years from now, Jeff, he's going to kick his diet and exercise into gear. And he'll be good for 50 years from now, Jeff, right? My future self is always perfect and awesome. It makes up for the flaws of my present self. And there are a lot of very cool interventions people are doing to try to overcome the fact that we don't connect to our future selves. I'm sure all of you know about the default option. Basically, if you go to sign up for a new job and your retirement savings, do you want to save 15% for retirement? And the default option is yes. Something like 80% of people say yes. If the default option is no, 80% say no. It's the same question. It's just what the default. So that's one way to overcome it. And there's actually some really cool, this guy Hal Hirschfeld, he's a scientist out at UCLA. If people put on virtual reality helmets and then spend 5 minutes interacting with a future version of themselves, they do better savings behavior for, I think the tail is a year or something. But that's not really scalable, but it's kind of cool.
Well, thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you very much.